Thank you very much indeed, Carlock. And I want to join the Taoiseach and Taoiseach in commending the budget to the House as the third party in a coalition government that is working collectively together to serve our people to the best of our ability. That's our entire focus. And I think this budget does it. I want to set out why. In a very uncertain world, in a very difficult time. I understand how my colleagues have to leave for a Council of State meeting. And
Sorry.
I wish them well. It's a very uncertain and difficult time. Just a lifetime of this government having to manage with COVID, have to manage with COVID, coming out of that, and for the Irish people, come straight out of that into a war in Ukraine and a cost of living crisis, and all framed within a wider reality that the climate change that's hitting our world is now reaching such dramatic proportions. It's gone beyond what anyone was predicting in terms of the impacts that we're seeing here today. Our weather system's completely going out of any modelling projection as to what would happen, which is leading to incredible concern among the scientific community that we need to act all the faster to try and protect our future on this planet for all our people all across the world. And it's also a very uncertain time in the world of economics, because and that you have to obviously take into account in framing a budget. You listen to economic advice. And it's unusual, to say the least, time where we've had this long period, very long period since the financial crash, of very, very low interest rates, and now suddenly a switch to interest rates. Bond yields in the States are up over 5%, in Ireland 3.2%, and very uncertain looking forward as to what is the economic future, even next year, that we're facing into, that you have to plan for. And we listen with real intensity to the Fiscal Advisory Council. You have to do that in this country after we see what's happened in the 80s or in the Celtic Tiger years, when we didn't look forward and tried to kind of budget so that we avoid economic shocks. And they're critical that we haven't stuck to the 5% spending rule that we set ourselves some 2-3 years ago, that it's instead the core funding increase is something like 6.1%. I would answer back to them in this speech that I think that's appropriate. I think it's appropriate because we've a much larger population increase than what was expected even 2 or 3 years ago, with the huge influx of people into our country. But also it's an uncertain year going ahead. My expectation, I'd listened with real concern to people say you don't want to provide a stimulus to an economy that is at full employment, that has seen very significant inflation in the last year. It's starting to come down. But that what we're going into next year is uncertain, but in my mind, maybe a more harsh and difficult economic environment than even we might have expected a few months ago. That the soft landing some were predicting in this strange world of long-time low interest rates and then very high interest rates is not likely to come back as quickly as some might expect. And I would argue that it was correct in those circumstances to live within that 6.1% limit that we set in the summer economic statement, and also to provide some of the one-off measures that I'm going to talk about that protect our people in this extraordinary, difficult and unusual time. And thirdly, if there's an objective, to make sure we are strategic in terms of supporting some of the investments we need to prepare for the future, not just to react to the current economic situation. Within that core spending, to break the budget down to its various components, I want to just focus on 3 or 4. You could go through every single department line, and each has got critical areas of improvement, investment, decisions that have to be made, but I want to reflect, if I can, just on 4. Not just because they maybe involve Green Party ministers, but also because I think they were some of the most key decisions, some of the most important developments within the budget process. And I want to start with the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. My colleague, Minister Roderick O'Gorman, has responsibility there. And the increase, the 1.41 billion increase to 7.3 billion spending, isn't the only signal of how this department now has a key central role in protecting, providing, helping our people. The obvious headline development that jumps out is of incredible consequence. The halving that will occur by this time next year of childcare costs for people across the country is unprecedented. I can't think, if someone can show me another example of a major public service, a major cost of living measure for so many families, a major issue that we all know was really hitting hard our people. Can someone show me an example elsewhere where we've halved the cost of a major public service within a 2-year time frame, and done in such a clever way, where Roderick agrees the arrangement with the providers first in terms of the quality and their ability to increase staff and so on, but it gets in return agreement that any further reductions go to the parents rather than just being eaten up in terms of increased inflation in the sector. It's a real achievement. It's an incredible achievement of strategic importance, of long-term consequence, and I want to commend him. But it wasn't just that. I would argue further that the key issue within his department, and it's only moved to his department now, obviously from health, but the focus we need to put on disability is an area where we need to step up as a state to improve the conditions that people with disability and parents of young people with disability have. It's not good enough at the moment. It's not working for a lot of people. We have to be honest and frank and upfront that there's a lot of cracks in our system, and we're going to have to focus and concentrate on that, and in a whole variety of different ways, and Rabbit and Roderick are working to that goal. And I won't go through the entire list, I won't go through all the, but some of the, I remember listening being part of those negotiations. We're standing up for foster care, where we increased the rate €75 a week, or €73 if it's like the older child. Opening up the access and inclusion model for 7,000 children with disability into our early childhood and childcare system. Expanding the Disability Action Plan by €55 million for some of the cracks at the moment. Any parent with a young adult knowing we don't have respite, we don't have daycare services, we don't have, God Almighty, we don't have the connection in our health system for those with disability, particularly autism, I would argue, to actually provide the needs for our people. Not every crack will be covered immediately. Not every improvement can come in any one budget. But there's real ambition within that department, with the ministers involved, and signalled in the budget to step in that direction, and we will continue taking those steps because it is actually our first priority. I would argue my own, if I can cover some of my own areas, just so I can speak with certain authority, I'm involved in it on a day-to-day basis. We're also seeing real strategic shift happening within budgets. You do have to prioritise. We have limited resources. You cannot just deliver absolutely everything, because take transport for example. We have a very significant capital budget, 35 billion, but we have €100 billion of projects in development and planning. And so there we have to prioritise, and we are prioritising public transport because we failed to do that as a state for the last 60, 70 years. And we need to catch up in providing the really high quality public transport that our people want and need and see actually starting to be delivered under this government. In Connecting Ireland, it's a transformative new project where we're rolling out every week a new rural bus service, or changing or improving or adding frequency to existing services. And the response has been incredible. In the last year alone, the volume, the numbers of passengers have gone up 112%. And similar on our other public transport services. Our bus services on average 15% above pre-COVID levels, our rail services 8% above pre-COVID levels, which is out of kilter with what's happening in the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. Most other countries haven't seen a return to pre-COVID levels. We're going right through it and beyond. One of the reasons is because last year's budget, we reduced the overall fares by 20%, and for those under 23 and under by 50%, which was actually a 60% cut when you combine the two together for those younger people. And it's younger people who are using these new bus services, rural bus services. They're the ones benefiting most, getting to the match, getting to training, getting to college, getting to school, getting to see friends. And therefore I think there was a significant and further enhancement to development of that we've extended it up to 24-year-olds and 25-year-olds. And we have to match that now. And those say, why not make everything free? Well, there's a problem with that because we also need to go beyond in terms of delivering new services. We've bus connects coming in Dublin, about to come out of the planning system. We have to build that, subject to the political support and subject, it's not just bus connects, it's also the other road space reallocations we need to do, which will require political strength and courage at local government level to make some hard decisions to make the public transport system work. Same in Cork, Metropolitan Rail. I expect coming out of planning shortly, we will build it. First priority, we need more balance, better balanced region development. So there is change happening within our Department of Transport. Change is easily talked about, but not as easily delivered. Because change a lot of times means disruption to people's lives, particularly in transport. And I commit, in the remaining time of this government and in our local councils right across the country, that we will be working collectively with other parties to try and make the decisions that deliver that level of change. Change is also happening in our homes. The Irish people are actually responding to the call for need for climate action and also helping to reduce their bills and also looking to create a better, warmer home, because the level of retrofitting is now ahead of the targets we set, which many people said were too ambitious, could not be delivered. We're delivering it in the retrofitting of our homes, about 1,000 homes a week. And all the public money skewed towards those in lowest incomes, social housing, warmer homes, trying to make sure we really target the funding we're getting to those houses that need it most. And it's working. And it's continued to increase. I think we've 47,000 applications in place, which is way up on last year. Solar PV, given examples of the change that's happening. 2 or 3 years ago, there might have been about 2,000 or 3,000, I think it was, houses selling electricity or with microgeneration, they call it. Now it's 70,000 within the space of 2 years. We've cut the VAT. We've introduced a new tax break yesterday to give further incentive to help make that happen. And it won't stop here. It's a positive change. This green transition has to be a just transition, and it's one that brings benefits to our people. Lastly, and I'm picking just maybe some from personal preference. You could pick a whole range of different government departments, key areas, key issues, education, social welfare, the arts, you name it. But I just want to mention 2 other. And I'm responding to the Taoiseach as much as anything else, some of the comments I heard him say in his final speech. What I think works best in government is when you start thinking 2, 3, 4 years out in terms of the change you're going to make. And I would argue in that, I can remember distinctly in the programme for government negotiations, there was a real clear commitment among the 3 parties that we needed to review what was happening in our defence forces, because the current system, the review had happened back in 2012, I think it was not working. The brigade structure we put in place wasn't appropriate. The resources that were not sufficient, particularly in capital, but also particularly in our naval service and our air corps, we needed to step up. So that decision almost 3.5 years ago to do the review, the commission, a review of our defence forces, then leads to a well thought out, well delivered, very good appropriate assessment. And we agree as a government the recommendations to that, and then the next year you start, last year's budget, you start investing in it, and this year again, what the Taoiseach to say, 1.23 billion. It's strange maybe for a Green Party minister, a party that's absolutely rooted, still is in peaceful tradition of politics, to put a priority on the defence spending, but we do need it. In recognition of the strength of our state, of the proud role on our state of our defence forces and their need for all the right equipment and the right conditions and right pay that they need to perform that function well. And I say that particularly because in this world of uncertainty we're at the moment, where climate change is driving all sorts of conflicts and all sorts of wars are happening, the role of our defence forces internationally has brought real honour to our country. Our first thoughts are always with them when you see conflict in a zone where they're at. It's matched in this budget, I would argue, by the important increase in overseas aid, which is really important in this world today, that we're seen, which we are seen, as a country which stands up for the poorest in this world. a country which meets its climate commitments. We are going to deliver that target of 225 million in climate finance by next year, which is an important signal to the rest of the world. We understand that we have to protect the weakest to build up all our strength. On the one-off measures, which are significant, they're not small. The energy credits, which was designed, developed and then delivered by my department, is not insignificant, but it is there for a reason. In 2023, this year, the average bills for gas and electricity in a home was €3,689. We were able to bring that down by some €600 with the energy credits. Next year, even assuming a 50% reduction in electricity prices this year, which we're seeing this autumn, and a further 10% reduction in electricity prices in February next year, it's an assumption, the analysis was the average bill would be something like €3,239. The €450 energy credit will bring that down to some €2,779. It's still way above the average in the previous, back in 2021, of about 2,000. So we are doing that to protect our people through difficult cost of living crisis. We will have to wean ourselves off all these various different measures because we have to continue to have money to put into the core services we need that you provide on an ongoing basis in disability and social welfare and education and so on. And some may argue that, oh well, it should be more targeted. It is more targeted. We're going to try and take out vacant housing, which we will do in our department, but it's also targeted because it's not the only measure. The social welfare measures, the increase in the child benefit, the increase in working family payment, the increase in fuel allowance, the increase, and I won't list all the different ones, on top of the lower costs of services in school books, in school transport, in college fees, in a whole variety of measures, targeted, it is true, at families. I think it is correct in this world of uncertainty and difficulty where it's hard to raise a family. It's hard, we're seeing our childbirth numbers reducing. And I think I worry about that in terms of, have we made it a difficult place to raise a family? And if that is a fear, then it's appropriate for us to target and help young families in whatever mechanism they use, to whatever type of family. We try and provide as much support to get families through that expensive and difficult and uncertain time. And as the Taoiseach said, create a country where it is a good and safe place to raise a child in a world of real uncertainty. Lastly, just in terms of strategic investments, from my perspective, the introduction of the new Infrastructure Climate Nature Fund is of huge strategic consequences. And again, it's coming from long-term thinking, where the last 2 or 3 years we've been approaching climate in a systemic way, set up the law, set up the task forces to start delivering it, learning from them where are some of the gaps that we need in terms of capital investment, in providing district heating, in improving our public buildings, in really more than anything else, I'd say, first real gap we have to close is in the protection of nature, the restoration of biodiversity and the beauty and strength and resilience of our natural world. And what this fund will do will take that sort of strategic approach where in the next 2 years we start pilot projects to test the investments in nature and in climate, and then it takes 2 or 3 years to get a programme working effectively in government. It takes that time to set up all the regulatory, legal and other mechanisms, the administrative and other things you need. But then by 26, 27, we're able to hit the ground running and use that money, which if we spent now would have an inflationary impact, but by then we'll be able to make sure that we spend it really wisely and well. And it's a really significant measure because the creation of the fund means that action on climate change is not in competing, which it could otherwise be, with you've got investment decisions, priorities that you will always have in social welfare, health, education, the core desire to protect your citizens. Yes, we will need to do that. Yes, we'll have to provide the economic basis for it. But the certainty that's provided when you create a climate and nature fund is that you can start planning for the investments we know we need to make to meet our climate targets, to restore nature, to get all the improvements that come with that. That fund is a strategic statement of real importance that says that this government is a green government, This country is a green Ireland, and the Irish people, I think, are behind that. That sort of clever, smart, strategic, long-term investment thinking is included in this budget as much as anything else. Thank you.
Minister.